nowadays, 75 till 80% of the land in the Netherlands is used for feed, not for human food. If there is no grassland anymore needed for feeding cows and other animals, you can give back a lot of land to nature.
Hello everyone and welcome to this live episode of the podcast Digging Deeper by Stichting Boerengroep Wageningen. This podcast digs deep into agricultural matters and practices and has the mission to fight for a social, sustainable and fair food system that nourishes not only people but also the planet. And this is our first live podcast episode that we're doing, which is very exciting. And the audio will be recorded and later be made available for a podcast episode. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. And for now, you can just sit back, relax, eat your lunch, and listen to an interview. And later, there will also be a discussion about today's topic, which is vegan farming. And we have a vegan farmer over here, Joost van Strien. Welcome, Joost.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah.
Can you start by telling us who you are and what you do?
Yeah. My name is Joost van Strien. I'm a farmer at Zonnegoed. Zonnegoed is a farm in Ens. It's in Flevoland, in the Noordoostpolder. I started in 1992 after I graduated here in Wageningen. I lived in the Bornse Steeg flat. And I started with this farm with the ideal of growing organic crops. It was a conventional farm, and after 5 years I decided to do this transformation to organic. So that was in 1997, already 27 years ago. And during this period I made several steps to a more and more sustainable system. And I always thought about how the ideal agricultural system would look like, in my opinion, and tried to make these practices that accords to this ideal system on my own farm. So, for example, in 2004, I started to grow biodynamic because I saw that growing organic by itself was not the ideal for me. But even biodynamic is not per se regenerative or good for nature or good for soil. So that's why I decided in 2010, I guess, to stop plowing. And that's one of the major changes in my practices. Because after that I saw a big change in soil life and how crops grew. Also how I had to organize my farm.
And what motivated you to stop plowing, for example?
I already thought about it when I started farming, because I know by plowing you destroy a part or a big part of your soil life. But plowing is a really effective way of get rid of all the stuff you leave behind after harvesting and make your fields ready for the next season. But I bought a plow which could plow really shallow. When that plow was too old, I decided to sell it and not buy another plow again. And that was the moment that I decided to stop plowing, because I was convinced that it was better for the soil.
And what were the major differences you saw after you stopped plowing?
More worms. Really a lot more worms. That's the most visual part of the soil life, because bacteria and fungi are difficult to see with your own eyes. But worms you can see, and well, that already after 2 years I saw a big increase of the worm population.
And so you said you stopped plowing, but now I introduce you as a vegan farmer. So since when do you call yourself a vegan farmer, and what principles do you, what are the principles that your vegan farm is based on?
Well, I think the most important principle is the principle of life. Live and let live. It's also about the ethics of the food production. For me, it's important not depend on a system where animals are killed. And as long as you use animal manure, you are depending on a system where animals are kept and killed. So that's the ethical part of this principle. But this principle of life is really broad because we want to regenerate the system and make it vital and create life wherever it's possible. So that goes about soil life, but also the ecosystem above the ground. So we plant trees. We have more than 15% of our surface is grown with perennials. We have a food forest. We have strips with herbs where we don't grow crops. Those strips are mainly to feed insects and other organisms. So in that way, we create a living ecosystem in the soil and above.
And so you're not using any animal manure, but animal manure, of course, adds a lot of nutrients to the soil, and therefore the crops can grow better. What do you do now to compensate for those nutrients that you do not add because you don't use any animal manure?
Yeah, well, I have to make distinction between nitrogen and other nutrients, because nitrogen, in my opinion, nitrogen can never be the problem, the availability of nitrogen, because what we breathe, 80% of it is nitrogen, and you can fix this nitrogen. Plants cannot do anything with this nitrogen that's in the atmosphere, but there are bacteria that live together with plants, the leguminous plants, that can fix the nitrogen out of the atmosphere and make it available for plants. So that's what we do. We grow leguminous plants like lucerne and clover. And the plants itself above the ground, we cut and chop and use it as manure, plant-based manure. And that contains a lot of nitrogen. In this way, we are self-sufficient, more than self-sufficient for nitrogen. So we don't need any manure or something else to provide our crops with nitrogen. That doesn't go for other nutrients like phosphate or potassium, calcium, phosphate. So that's another story because when we produce our crops and we sell it, we export it from our farm. So all the nutrients leave the farm. So we have to bring it back into the soil to make sure that the level of nutrients in the soil will be high enough. And we do that by collecting just plants that are mowed in a natural reserve close by. So we collect these plants and we make compost of it. And the nutrients that are in these plants are enough to provide our system with all the nutrients that we export.
And how many hectares of those plants that you mow and compost, how many hectares do you need to get enough nutrients to supply, for example, 1 hectare on your crops on your farm?
Yeah, I don't know exactly how many hectares of natural reserve Zonnegoed, our farm, needs to provide us from enough compost. I think our farm is 90 hectares. I think we need 30 till 40 hectares of natural reserve in the way that we are organizing it now.
Okay, and I think I read somewhere that there are only a few vegan farmers in the Netherlands, right?
2.
2. Okay, so there's 1 other person. But let's say in the future more farmers want to transition to a vegan approach. Do you think there is enough natural resource to get like enough compost for example, phosphate for the crops?
No. Yes and no. Depends on how agriculture will look like in the future. Because when in my ideal system there are no
like industrial animals.
Yeah. Of course there are animals, but not industrial animal keeping anymore. Nowadays, 75 till 80% of the land in the Netherlands is used for feed, not for human food. So if you think about that, If there is no grassland anymore needed for feeding cows and other animals, you can give back a lot of land to nature. So there will be more nature in this ideal system, but not enough to provide the plant-based food production. And that's why we need another system. So what we are doing now is not for the long term and also not for the large scale.
And this other system is something that we will talk about a little bit later in the discussion. But for now, you said you have 19 hectares, right, on your farm. What kind of crops do you grow there?
We grow potatoes, onions, carrots, red beets, parsnip, wheat, pumpkins, of course, and lucerne. I always say lucerne is the most important crop on our farm.
Kind of the engine, maybe, of
yeah, exactly.
And is there enough, is there a market for your vegan vegetables? Do you, how is that going, on an economic level?
I think we sell less than 1% as really as vegan vegetables. And what we are doing is quite new and not really known in retail, in supermarkets, and also a lot of consumers do not know the idea behind vegan farming. So we have to tell the story more and more. We are talking with one online supermarket right now who is interested, and so it's starting.
And if people here want to buy some of your products, is there already a way to find it?
Yeah. You can go to noshitfood.nl and buy a nice vegetable box. No Shit is the name that we use to communicate. I have to correct something because I said there are 2 vegan farmers in the Netherlands. There are more, but most of them are small-scale vegetable producers.
Like community-supported farms? Then?
Yeah, like that. But there are 2 farms that are registered, certified. And the certification, the label is called Biocyclic Vegan. So there are 2 farmers with this Biocyclic Vegan certificate. It's quite a difficult name. People do not remember this name. So that's why I thought about a more catchy name. So I came up with No Shit. So if you're interested, you can go to noshitfood.nl and you can not only order vegetables, but you can also read the whole background of our farm.
And is the other vegan farmer also included in the No Shit Food movement, or is it just you?
Not yet. He has just started.
Okay.
And he's interested, but it's not big enough to expand. Not yet.
And you already mentioned a little bit about your ideal agricultural world, like no animals have to be killed. Can you elaborate a little bit more on if you were to decide how agriculture would look in the future, how you would design it?
Yeah, the base will be plant-based human food. I think it's an utopia to think there are no animals anymore in the food system, but I think the animals will have a role in recycle rest products from the industry, for example. Now, not only in the Netherlands, but in the whole world, 75 till 80% of the land, the agricultural land, is used for feed. In the future, that will be minimized. In an ideal situation, land will only be used for human food production. And animals will recycle rest sources. In that way, we don't need more land for agriculture, for food production, because in the last 200-300 years we regained more and more land from nature to feed the world's population, and it's still growing. So in a sustainable system, we don't eat meat anymore, and we don't use dairy products anymore. So the ideal future is vegan farming, if you ask me.
And if the dairy industry would shrink, we of course would have less animal manure. And a lot of farms now depend on animal manure to provide their crops from nutrients. We already talked about the vegan compost. I also read something on your website about closing the nutrient cycle in a different way. I'm not sure if you know where I'm aiming for, but can you tell a little bit about that? About maybe also using human manure to provide our crops from nutrients.
Yeah, well, in the future, that's the only way we can produce sustainable. The system now depends on artificial fertilizers, which use a lot of energy to produce or use ending sources. So that's not sustainable. And cows and pigs and chicken do not produce nutrients. They only recycle it because they are fed and just pass through the nutrients. And the feed production costs a lot of land, and every year rainforest is cut to produce more soybeans and maize and so on. So we are using the planet to let the population, the human population, grow, and we need more. We already need more than one planet in the way we live now.
So we're not giving enough back in a way then.
Exactly, and to make it sustainable, we have to make a real cycle. So all the nutrients that leave the agricultural system are wasted now. So they are dumped into the ocean or burned in ovens. So all the nutrients are lost. And it's a really strange way we are living right now.
So we have some grounds to win over there.
Yeah.
Luckily, we also have somebody from Wageningen who's doing research on human manure here. And I would like to invite him.
I'm Kimo van Dijk. I'm working here as a researcher at Wageningen Environmental Research, so part of WUR. I work in the team Sustainable Soil Use. I'm not a soil scientist, I'm a biologist. And I work at recycling waste flows or residual flows. And one of those flows is wastewater or sludge that's coming from wastewater. And in that case, you have wastewater from communal sources, so households. And you have it from industrial agro-food processing plants. Now, at this moment, we are doing a project which is called KNAP, which stands for kringloopsluiting van nutriënten uit afvalwater en proceswater, so recycling nutrients from wastewater. And in that project, there are actually 3 types of systems that we take into account. One type of wastewater is that we know, so the wastewater treatment plants that we have, so the existing infrastructure, so the sewage system. From there you can have different products that are coming out of those flows. That can be a struvite, as a crystallization process. It can be a kind of nitrogen-rich like product, which is made by a stripping process. So that's one. Another more future-like system is what I would call circular sanitation. I live at a sustainable housing project, and there we have, for example, an apart tube system for collecting urine from a source-separated toilet. So we have different households, and there we can source urine, so from human source. And by doing some treatments, some more biological process, a little bit more electrochemical process, we can make a urine-based mineral product that's full of minerals, so potassium, phosphate, and a lot of other things, and that can also be used. So the second system is, let's say, the future system, circular sanitation. And then there's a third type of wastewater, and I think could also be of interest for you as a farmer. That is, if you deliver pumpkins to a processing industry, I'm not sure if you do, but if a farmer would do that, then it's processed into soup and all kind of products that we can buy at the shop. And there are also all type of waste flows, including also wastewater. So also those flows could be used. So the question could be, if you have no manure, it's the biggest flow, and you have a little bit of vegan compost from nature areas. Apart from that, there are wastewater flows that we could use. And wastewater is then very broad because urine and poo, you have also something that's called black water. So that's not separated. So then urine, poo, and a little kitchen waste flows. So wastewater, that's then combined. So there are different projects also in the Netherlands that work on urine separation and also on black water-like systems. The issue is, of course, because it's not only a positive story, the issue is, of course, the contaminants that you can have in those flows. And for urine, in that case, it's mostly medicine residues, if people consume medicines. Heavy metals is not a big issue, because in a urine flow, those are not inside because we don't eat them, so no cadmium or that kind of stuff. And also zinc and copper, which is a heavy metal, but also micronutrients. It's needed. You just told me that you need it even. That is not in the urine because it's not going to a copper tube or a zincified attribute. So metal-like products that have zinc in it, let's say. So there's a lot of opportunity, but also some risks. And the key is to have separation at source, to have it as clean as possible. Because if you have a wastewater treatment plant, so the system that we have in the Netherlands, for now that is incinerated, so the sludge is incinerated in the Netherlands. We all lose those nutrients, also the contaminants, but also the nutrients. And that is because it's too contaminated. If you have a city, you have households, but you have also companies like a painting company or something else, and they also drop all kind of contaminants into the wastewater system.
Okay, so thank you so much for telling a little bit about the research that you're doing right now. So we have one person that's like an expert in vegan compost as a nutrient supply, and that humanure that also can maybe become a potential nutrient supply in the future. So over here we have a statement: to produce food in a sustainable way, we should transition to vegan compost and humanure as a nutrient supply instead of chemical fertilizer and animal manure. So I would like to open the discussion or a dialogue about this. So I'm curious if there's anyone in the audience who has an opinion on this, or maybe questions, because of course you have two experts here. You can also just ask a question.
Hi, thank you for all the information. I have a question for Joost. Your farm is on clay soil, right? Can you reflect on the extent to which you now rely on nutrients that have been stored in the soil by previous land use? And maybe also on the fact that I imagine that your vegan compost from the nature areas might decline in nutrient density over time as you export nutrients and don't add anything over there in the nature areas. And then as a conclusion, like, how do you think this would be able on, or do you think vegan agriculture would be possible on sandy soils that are not able to store as much nutrients and organic matter as clay soils?
Good question. I'm in a luxury position that I'm farming on a rich soil, rich of nutrients. So if I only produce without adding nutrients, maybe it can last for another 50 years. So that's quite comfortable. But of course, I aim to balance the export and the import of nutrients. Now I need this natural reserves. And it's true, you take nutrients from that area. The plants are exported from these areas because of the nitrogen. That's the whole nitrogen problem that we have. There's not too much nitrogen in these natural reserves. That's why they mow it and get rid of it. So it's a win-win situation right now. But the question is, what will happen when you do it for a long time and you also take other nutrients from these reserves? We don't know yet what the consequences are. And like I said, it's not a system that is suitable for the long term. So on the long term, we need our own manure, the human manure. And your second question was about sandy soils. I don't have experience. I have a little bit experience on a sandy soil. It's more a challenge to keep the nutrients because they leach more easy from a sandy soil. But the thing is that you always have to add your nutrients, and especially nitrogen, together with carbon, together with organic matter. And in this way you can also make your sandy soil more suitable for keeping the nutrients. So it's a completely different way than just adding nutrients in the form of chemical fertilizers. When you do it in an organic way, you will improve the soil life and fertility of a sandy soil. You can also improve it on a sandy soil.
Someone like Arjen van Buren, I think, has a pretty optimized farm, but with a lot of legumes and grass lays in between, I think, strip cropping, that kind of stuff. But I think he still uses animal manure. I think it's minimized, but he still uses it. Maybe that's the future of this kind of optimization on sandy soils, where you still need some, but a minimal amount.
Yeah, well, on my farm, I don't see the difference between the dung, so the animal manure with straw, with a lot of carbon, with a lot of organic matter, and the plant-based manure. As long as you use slurry on a sandy soil, it's difficult to replace it by plant-based. But there are a lot of farmers on sand that don't use this slurry. So in my opinion, like I said, cows don't add nutrients to the system. What you need when you don't have the stomach of the cow, let's say, anymore, you need a stomach in your soil to mobilize the nutrients. That's what our cattle is doing now. So if you have a healthy soil, your soil can do what a cow is doing now.
Good afternoon, and thank you for your knowledge. I'd like to know more about the status of the humanure, because thinking it's a waste stream. I don't know what is the actual status of the waste can become a product that could be applied in a food chain, or how is, for instance, a vegan farmer accepting this technology?
I think that's the biggest bottleneck at this moment. In the KNAP project, we are focusing actually on the more legislative issues that there are. In the Netherlands, at this moment, only struvite, so that's a kind of crystal, a phosphate-rich crystal that is harvested at sewage plants, that is accepted as an official fertilizer. Then there is a way to have to also have the nitrogen-like liquid that you can harvest by a stripping process. There's a way to put it in the European fertilizer regulation. If you look to urine or black water or mostly those two, there's no scope for commercial use as a fertilizer at this moment. But in the project we are working on that, at least to get the knowledge base to get maybe in the end it accepted. And it's then two aspects. One is it is checked what is the source of a kind of fertilizer. So then urine and poo is not a category. And another thing is that for all fertilizers, apart from manure, and I mean animal manure, because there are less regulation or no regulation, but there it is also about the levels of contaminants, so heavy metals, for example. And in the Netherlands, since 1995, we incinerate all the sewage sludge that we have from communal sources, households. So 100% is incinerated, all lost, the phosphorus, the potassium, etc. and that was a decision by the water boards. So the waterschappen. So that's a kind of semi-political body. But that was a decision by them. It's officially you can still use sewage sludge on the land, but then there are quite very strict heavy metal limits. In other countries in the EU and also worldwide, sewage sludge is used. So, for example, in Germany, UK, many countries, maybe 50 to 70% of the sewage sludge is still used. But then you get into also the contaminant issue, of course.
Yes, but also now I'm getting maybe other question like, what about the pathogens, for instance?
Yeah, there are different contaminants, and I mean then broadly speaking, so pathogens, heavy metals, but also things like medicine residues, PFAS, all kind of types. And if you look to source separation kind of products, so urine or poo urine products, so black water or compost toilets, there you have to make a difference. Urine is quite sterile, so that means pathogens is not a big issue. That's also what we get in the analysis back from our products that we have. If you look to black water, there you have organic material, and there also microorganisms can grow. But then you can, for example, choose for a digestion process, anaerobic digestion, to make biogas. There's also a question from my side to you. You choose for composting. Do you also consider to use digestion? Because you just made a link with the cow. That's a digestion process. But is there something?
No, I didn't think of that. Maybe it's an idea. What we are doing now, beside of composting, is conservating, like the plant-based manure that we produce by ourselves. We put in a store. Yeah. So that's not composting, but conservating. But I never thought of that, and I'm not sure if it will add something to the way I use. Because what will be the consequences when you do that? Can you tell me something about it?
Yes, I think at least compost is more stable. So it has the more stable carbon in it, because it's a longer process of the organic part. So I think if you say we have also storage over winter time or long storage, then I think composting would be the best. But you see that for black water, for example, digestion, that is also a kind of microorganism process, and then you can also stabilize. If you go to the sewage sludge, so that's the present system. Yeah, there you can have all kind of contaminants. So it could be pathogens like E. coli, for example. That's possible, but especially the heavy metals are an issue. But there is also a way that I did not tell that. But at this moment, if you look to a wastewater treatment plant, there are different routes. There's one that you get struvite out of it, but that's only part of the phosphate and some other nutrients. Another one is that you say we use the sludge on land, like in neighboring EU countries is still the case. And another one is that you say, okay, we incinerate it because that's what we do. Germany, the Netherlands, Switzerland are doing that. And that you say we take the ashes that are now going to asphalt, there's the name coming from, and that you use that as a resource for fertilizer production. And this sentence is quite interesting because there's the word chemical fertilizer. The opposite is organic fertilizer. And I think if you look to the products that you can get out of humanure or the wastewater that's coming, the difference is, I think it's difficult to get to be very principled in that. So struvite would be a mineral fertilizer. If you have sewage sludge, it would be, let's say, an organic fertilizer. So there are different type of fertilizers, like chemical fertilizers, mineral, but also organic fertilizer that can be made out of all the flows that I already discussed. And pathogens in general, there's one quick fix for that, and that is partly digestion, and another one is heating it up to 60, 70 degrees, and almost all pathogens are gone. But in that case, also you can lose your nitrogen because that is going into the air then.
I would like to say something about what you mentioned about the chemical fertilizer. I think it's really good not to be really dogmatic about it, because when you isolate the nutrients from the sludge. It's almost the same as the chemical fertilizers we are using now. But it's circular, and that's the most important, that we have a circular system of nutrients. Because now we are using the ending sources. But the organic fertilizers are important when you use nitrogen. Then you have to have organic matter to combine nitrogen and carbon. But for the other nutrients, I think it's not that important. How realistic is it that in maybe 10 years the system that you are researching now is scalable for that we can make the system circular?
I think, again, you have to make a distinction between the different things that I discussed. So if you look to the present system, the sewage system and the wastewater treatment plants, there it's happening at this moment. So struvite is happening. Also that kind of ammonium sulfate or ammonium nitrate-like stripping process are happening. The sewage system is available, but the contaminants is an issue. So that's the present system. And if you look to the circular processes, the circular sanitation systems, yeah, there are several projects now in the Netherlands. So there's at least on Blackwater, there's the system in Noorderhoek in Sneek. There is one now starting in Kerkrade. It's a flat, a high-rise building. But yeah, there are only a few ones. The big issue here is that, like with electric cars, like with also the farming systems, actually, it's a transition. If we now build in the Netherlands 1 million of houses that they are aiming at, it would be very stupid not to at least install separated urine collection tube systems in it. Then you can say, okay, we have a building for 100 years. Maybe it will take 10 years to get to technology that's even better than we have now, because it can already be done. And then, so it's a kind of transitional model that you need. And my suggestion to a minister or the next political system that we have would be, please, like in Belgium, for example, put some rules on it. So in Belgium, for example, new buildings need collection of rainwater, for example. That's a national rule. You could also do that on circular sanitation systems. And then you get into decentralized system. And that means that you have also other issues. Then it's also about how to collect, how much energy is that costing? Can we secure the quality of the product? That kind of issues are then there. But that's the same with if you go to big scale farming to more decentralized. I think it's quite comparable, the issues that arise.
So if you want to change it as fast as possible, you have to use the system that we have now. The way we are collecting our excretions is via het rioleringsstelsel. What is needed to take the nutrients out of there in a hygienic way and on a large scale, so that the agriculture can use it, and we can get rid of the chemical fertilizers that use ending sources?
I think you should do both. So one is the present system, and there that's mainly the urban systems then. But the Netherlands is a kind of urban area, you could say. But there you have the technologies are there. The acceptance of the fertilizer is also there. So it's mainly upscaling. So it means that wastewater treatment facilities should choose for a struvite crystallization reactor or something else. On the other side, there's the circular sanitation system. I think that can be both. And that means that if you have new buildings, new neighborhoods that are built, so maybe even a new village they talk about, or if you renovate existing flats, for example, it would be quite easy, quite possible to install there the future-proof circular sanitation like requirements that you have. And at this moment there's a lot of there are quite some installations for struvite. So there are, I think, up to 10 or 15 reactors placed. And that's also interesting because phosphate is also precipitated in a wastewater treatment plant naturally. And then you get clogging into the pipes. That's a big issue. So what they did, I think 10 years ago, they started to think, how can we do that not by accident, but that we do it by purpose. So that's why the reactors are now there. And then they get struvite out of it. Different qualities, can be very high, very nice pellets. But it can also be more sandy-like, a little bit wet, maybe even a little bit organic-like flows. So different qualities. And of course, the higher the quality is, the higher the price, but also the higher the investment cost and the energy, etc.
Thank you. I was also wondering about the energy efficiency of all this. Like, if you talk about you briefly mentioned it, that you, in the end, you want to use less energy. It can be circular, but you also don't want to have a lot of input of energy in extracting this. And if that's also something that you research on.
There have been some studies on that, so LCA-like work. For nitrogen, I think you're fully correct. It is about energy, because we can also extract it from the air or use plants, like an area issue. For nitrogen, generally speaking, if you talk about stripping processes, it can be energy neutral. So it's not something to save energy, but it is energy neutral. If you go to decentralized systems, the benefit is that you have less energy use at the centralized place, so the wastewater treatment plant, because there's a lot of energy also used at this moment already to get rid of the nitrogen into the air. Denitrification is the process. But decentralized systems have the tendency to also use, of course, energy and also materials. So there's a kind of balance. And if you look to the ash-based processes, so if you take sewage sludge from a wastewater treatment plant, incinerate it like we do, and then make fertilizer out of it, that is also energy neutral. But there, nitrogen is lost, because with incineration, also organic carbon and nitrogen is lost. But the minerals stay there. So you have then a mineral based fertilizer. And for minerals, it's not about energy. You want something to be recycled. Because if it's going to landfills, or it's going to road building, asphalt, or it's going even worse to the sea, let's say, in the end, that's something that you don't want. So it's difficult to say, it's higher in energy use, but because of that, we don't recycle the minerals. That's something different, let's say. Yeah, that's not comparable.
I see. But then if you would just digest your sludge, then you don't use extra energy at all, right? If you just digest the sludge, because I heard of projects in eco-villages and stuff where they just digest their poo and all, and then they just apply it on their gardens.
Yeah, so you mean anaerobic digestion?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so and it can also be small scale. That is, for example, a company that's called Cirque. They have small scale digesters, and they put them at restaurants, catering companies. Digestion is, generally speaking, not rocket science, let's say, but is mostly energy neutral. So if you look to a big scale anaerobic digestion plant for manure, for example, that's an example that I know. The energy that you recover by methane production, biogas, is comparable to what you need in the end for nutrient recycling equipment afterwards. Yeah, and this is about the production side. I assume that most of these products can be used in normal farming or vegan farming in the same way, but you also need application equipment. So if you have a liquid urine, so the mineral, we call it urine mineral concentrate, we call the product. So it's a mineral concentrate from urine. That can be, best would be to have it underground injected, although there are some issues with injection, I know. But that would, regarding the emissions, because there's another discussion point that we can have. Yeah, you would like to reduce your ammonia emissions, your nitrogen emissions, or N2O emissions, laughing gas. And if you would like to do that, then the best would be to inject it into the soil and have a relatively low pH, because then it's not going into the air. But so apart from energy, there's also something like emissions that you should take into account.
Yeah, I have some questions by this injecting in the soil, because that kills a lot of soil life. because of the ammonia that's in the urine. Why don't you add it to your compost heap to put the nutrients and the nitrogen in the compost and combine it with the organic matter?
I introduced already that I'm living at a sustainable housing project at a farm in Arnhem. It's called Arneco. We developed that, and we have indeed also our own vegetable garden. And there's a guy that had his own. Maybe you know him, Piet. His family I forgot, but he had a farm, a biodynamic farm in Lelystad or near Lelystad. Yeah, and he's now, let's say, running the garden mostly with us together, and he's also the manager of the compost heap, and he's indeed doing this. So he's adding the urine as a kind of fuel, nutrient fuel to the compost heap. So that's done. That can be done. That's a way of thinking. Okay? For example, you can also say if you have perennials, you just said, so apple trees or something. You can also say you have a PVC tube, put it in the ground, and heat the liquid like fertilizer in it, and then it can be injected or can passively go into the soil. I'm not sure if that is very bad for the. Okay, then we have to talk about that. At the same time, if we have 8 billion people on planet Earth, we also have to do something in how intensive or extensive the system can be. And I would be the first person that say, let's have less babies, etc., etc. But that's also the case. So in the Netherlands, we have 18 million people. And the question is, can we do then extensive systems? But I've not the answer, no.
Okay, I think when I look at the time, there's maybe time for one more question. Not sure if I see a hand over there. Yes, yeah.
Thank you for the nice discussion. I have a question for you as a farmer. In the beginning, you made quite a strong assumption that there cannot be farming using manure that doesn't involve the killing of animals as well. And I personally don't agree to this statement, because I think you can have animals on farm and manage them in ways where you can have the benefits of having their manure without having to kill them. And I was wondering if when you were developing your farm, you also consider these alternatives of, let's call it, mixed farming systems of crops and livestock.
Yeah, that's an interesting view. And I'm thinking about some ways of combining vegetable production with animals. I'm doing it right now, but not cows and goats and chicken, but bees and worms and birds. But you mean production animals for eggs or for milk, for example? Yeah, just to produce manure and to recycle, for example, grass, and just be there. I think this way of keeping animals fits in vegan farming. It sounds strange, but then you have, I always say, the system is not free of animals, it's only with free animals. So if you don't limit animals in their being, then it's okay to keep them. Keeping and killing, because as soon as you keep animals, in somehow you will limit their being. So it's a really thin line where you are on then. But it's worth exploring. It's a really good question, but for me, I draw a line with keeping animals.
Okay. Again, when I look at the time, I'm afraid that we have to start to wrap up. But I always ask a question at the end of the podcast episode if the guest of today wants to give a final take-home message. So I would like to give Joost the opportunity to, if there's anything that you would still like to say, take some space and do it now.
All right, thank you. What I didn't mention is how we organize labor on our farm. Because in organic farming, it's quite a challenge to find good people. What we are doing the last 3-4 years is we organize labor by organizing campings. So we have a harvest camping and a wheat camping. And by wheat camping is, of course, picking weeds. So people come for a week, we cook for them, we organize discussion evenings, we show movies, we do excursions, and people work with us on the farm, picking weeds or harvest pumpkins, something like that. So, if you're interested to know more about Zonnegoed, you can just sign in for a week and come to work with us and learn more about vegan farming. And of course, you can also, but I already said it, go to our web shop and buy a nice box of vegetables.
And can they find the information about the camping on your website, Zonnegoed?
Almost ready.
Okay.
We are building a new website, and it will be live in a few weeks.
Okay.
And the third thing is that we also organize excursions on our farm. And I already talked to Irene that maybe there will be an excursion next summer, because then it's much more interesting to look around than today.
Nice. So if you're interested in someday going to Zonnegoed, keep an eye on Boerengroep. You can find us on Instagram, LinkedIn. There's also a WhatsApp group. You can go to one of us or Irene over there if you want some more information. I just want to thank you all for coming, and also for our guests. I think it's a very interesting topic. It's about more research, about transitions, and maybe also mindset change. And I also think it's a very much an ethical discussion. Again, thank you so much for coming. If you're interested in these kind of topics, you can scan a QR code that's on the posters that are spread everywhere. We already have a few episodes about agroecological topics, so make sure you check us out. We also have an Instagram now. It's podcast_digging_deeper. So you can keep up, you can stay posted on what we're doing with the podcast. So again, thank you so much for coming, and hopefully if we in the future have another live podcast, we hope to see you again. Thank you and have a very nice day.